wired to be single, wired to be solo, whatever you want to call it. When it comes to the concept of being by yourself, it can come with a couple different connotations. It can be a relationship status, a moment in time, or just a mindset when it comes to the activities or hobbies you partake in. The word reclusive can come to mind sometimes, but maybe it's something else. Maybe some of us are just becoming wired to be by ourselves. First, let's talk about the world we live in. It's constantly changing, and something to note is that flying solo is becoming more common than it was in the past. For as long as I've known, tons of folks around my age were attached to this idea and this view and the pursuit of the other half. But due to circumstances like a rougher economy and a wilder dating pool, I think many of us have shifted our approach to life in general. It's a give and take in a lot of ways. I think older generations didn't really have the opportunities that people do now. Whether it's to seek new experiences, explore different options, whatever it may be. The truth of the matter is, I think a lot of us started to realize that getting involved with the wrong situation or person could completely alter your life. Ultimately, by now, I think it's clear that some of us just prefer to do our own thing. There's a certain level of peace and freedom that comes with only having to worry about yourself. And I think so many folks never learn how to be individuals or stand on their own 2 feet. They sort of go from growing up with family to moving in with roommates to maybe a girlfriend or boyfriend if that's your kind of thing, but specifically for the ladies. And eventually they might get married. But all that while, they never really learn how to be independent as a person. And I think many times that creates problems down the line, where they almost try to steal back their freedom and their individuality. On the flip side, you have those who do things the opposite way. They can date and have relationships, but they always sort of maintain the space they need for themselves. And as a result, I think it definitely leads to being smarter about who we allow into our lives. In many ways, the idea of what other people have can seem really appealing, because oftentimes we don't get the whole picture. But I think with enough experience and introspection, you start to recognize the downsides and the risks as opposed to only focusing on the blind pursuit. It's like a reflecting experience. Having the ability to love, specifically the practice of it, but not the delusion of it, is a powerful thing. It definitely changes the way you operate overall. And personally, I'd rather put logic first before anyone, or at least I try to. But sometimes you just know too much, seen too much, and dealt with too much for any wayward shit to be worth it. Fact is, some of us are committed to our hobbies, our financial pursuits, our creative pursuits, things like that. And also to the ability to make decisions and change our minds just because we feel like it, without consultation. Not just that, but we're connected to our leisure too. It can be things like learning languages, playing video games, getting through a series, movie series, TV series, whatever. We can also read, we can expand our knowledge on any particular subject by just gaining skills, putting our focus into that, or into our physical health and our fitness. And maybe it's just about having a disposable income. There's a whole different spectrum of things that you can do. We just aren't aligned to the idea of forcing things. And you know, as a guy, everything within the context of dating can be a huge distraction for us. It's very difficult to have a low maintenance relationship with a woman. There generally has to be an ongoing or constant engagement because that's just how they are. And just speaking for myself and people like me, it's hard to be in a long-term relationship because of that. People like me can go long periods without talking to someone. And it's not because we're being spiteful or trying to be problematic. It's just because that's just how we are. That's just our natural mode. Like, yeah, I'm a believer that men and women are complements to each other, like puzzle pieces in more ways than one. But that's only in the case when things are operating in the right way. When things aren't going well, we're definitely like repellents or like polarized magnets or whatever they call it when things push away from each other. I don't know. Because we simply operate differently from one another just from a natural perspective. Sure, we speak the same language, but there can oftentimes be a disconnect. And with the way things are becoming now, especially with all the gender warring going on and mismatched expectations or super high expectations for just no reason and all the chicanery and trickery and all that stuff going on, the sentiment has basically become, yeah, I want you, but I don't need you. And I always say this, being single is great. And the longer you do it, the less you want to give it up. Take me, for example. I'm very well aware of why I don't want to be in a relationship, and I even did a video about it. But a lot of people aren't aware. So they cycle through these periods of enjoying a relationship, then they blow it up to be single, or they enjoy being single and they blow it up to be in a relationship. And my belief is that it comes from, again, mismatched expectations, as I mentioned earlier. When some folks are single, they enjoy all the perks of it, but then they get into a relationship and they still want the same perks. Compromise isn't an option, but you got to do it for them. Freedom isn't an option, but you got to give it up for them. Vulnerability isn't an option, but you got to put everything on the table for them. Loyalty isn't an option, but you got to be true to them. Honesty also isn't an option, but you got to keep it 100, while they keep you on a need-to-know basis. Many people are wired to be single, but they can't come to grips with it. They only want relationships when it benefits them, or they can use you. Now, obviously, as a guy, I'm going to put this on the women here, but again, it applies to who it applies to. Plenty of us just don't want to deal with all that stuff, and staying single gives you the option of playing by your own rules. Again, the more you know, the better off you are. Because let's just keep it real, a lot of people's relationships are just for show nowadays. Most aren't going to last forever or even that long in general, and really only a small percentage stand the test of time in an overall positive way. There's just a lot of unseen costs and prices to pay for staying in certain situations for too long. So you're just going to have some of us who say, I'll just get a boo or whatever. We can have fun and do stuff together too. If they act right, the show goes on. If they don't, then move on. My belief is that people who become wired to be single simply develop a resistance for situations that take them out of their purest state. A lot of times, it takes a special level of blissful short-sightedness to go into high leverage investments with another person, especially knowing that most of the relationship is built off of emotions. Some of us don't want to move in with you. We don't want to buy a house with you. We don't want to share any accounts of any sort. We don't want to do anything that could potentially hamper us in the future. And personally, I think that's a very, very justified stance to have. Maybe because the first thought is, this is probably going to end at some point, right? So why would I make it more difficult to get out of this eventually? And I know it's kind of funny to say that, but when you think about it, nobody gets into relationships really expecting them to end, but a lot of them do. Most of them do. So what ends up happening with a lot of people is that they get into these high leverage investments with other people, and this is how they get stuck, and they can't get out in the future. So again, some of us are just going to say, this is as far as I'm going to go, and that's just what it is. All that other stuff is just too much. Ultimately, you can't force people to go where they don't want to go, and you can't make them do what they don't want to do, because it's not going to work out for anybody involved. But look, preferring to be by yourself doesn't mean you don't enjoy the presence of other people. It doesn't mean you don't care about anyone, nor does it mean you aren't willing to be communicative, helpful, supportive, or loving. But it does mean you've recognized your limitations. We can be really close, but still far away enough that if we have to go our separate ways, it won't be an issue. It's important to acknowledge that love is hard, especially when it comes to loving yourself. And most of the work comes from identifying the things that prevent you from being fully yourself. So in order to do that, we have to embrace our individuality, embrace our space, embrace our freedom, embrace our time, embrace our progression. I'm always big on solitude and being dedicated full time to the things that make you better. Everything else is better off being part-time. There's just something about the right vibes, the right times, and the right frequencies. If it's not the right tune or not in sync, it's not worth the struggle. At some point in time, we have to let go of that feeling that we're doing something wrong and focus on how to make things work for us. And hell, at this point, being single just might be the smart thing to do. Sometimes all you have is all you need. If you made it this far, I appreciate y'all for watching. I have a newsletter below where you can subscribe for more notes just like this, headed straight to your inbox. And yeah, subscribe for more. Peace.